Well, hello. Welcome to In the Court of the Wenton King. So yeah. That was weird. Welcome to a new, slightly revised In the Court of the Wenton King. No notes, because I've been making notes, and I enjoy making notes. It's actually a thing that I enjoy making the notes more than making the video. And I like to go and sit in a library or in McDonald's or something, and I read the paper and eat, and I finish eating, I'll get the tablet out, and I think it's to the detriment of the videos, actually, because I'm just telling you a history lesson. So forget that, there's no notes. Here we are with Passion and Warfare, 1990. And then in 1985 this happened, and then in 1986. Second album, hopefully, we want to try and talk about the music a bit more, I think is the thing. This is his 80s album, really. There's only one of them, I think, and this is his 80s album. And I think, I found in more than one place calling it the best instrumental album of the 80s. And it's from 1990, which is interesting in itself. But of course the 80s finished in about 93, something like that, 92. And yeah, and what everyone would say, well, this is a big change since Flexible. Flexible was like Frank Zappa and it was all proggy, and now he's just doing blah 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 blah, which isn't really true. My argument is, stylistically, he's very well defined in what he does, and particularly I think Flexible. If you listen to it in a different order, listen to Able before you listen to Flex. The Able side sounds stylistically is the same stuff as this. This is just better production, and it's very very well produced. And not in an 80s way, I was surprised actually that it's not tinny 80s or anything like that, it's full sound, and obviously maybe when you're focusing on one instrument as the focus, that makes it easier, and that's the difference really, isn't it, in production. So obviously, I don't want to spend all the Steve Vai reviews talking about he plays with no speed and all speed and no feeling, and all that stuff. And obviously that's nonsense. This is his first sign of a spiritual album, if you want, you can call it that. And what does that really mean? Well, it means, the cover it's actually a terrible cover. Although I like the fact it's that way. I think that's quite cool, because the songs fit that way, that's quite good. But yeah, there's fairies on it, it's all... And that is really hot, an 80s cover for me. But yeah, for him this was spiritual. One of the songs he actually fasted for several days to record it. And you could say, well, it's a bit like John Anderson. And, in that sense, if you look at it like that, well, I think he's very, very successful in making something very, very accessible that is a very spiritual thing for him. But really, I think it's more about, there's the Steve Vai character is imprinted on this album. And the fact that it's kind of in a narrower way, and it's less of a diversity. There's no singing on the album. It's all instrumental. That Steve Vai-ness is on there. You think you know it. Like a lot of musicians, people think they know him. They don't really know him, never met him. But the Steve Vai public persona, musical statement thing is on this album and very well defined. It's in a way a coming of age album, although he's still a young man making crazy music with ludicrous amounts of discipline.
Yeah, I'm kind of disappointed on the back. You see, you got the legs there. For some reason, I'm kind of disappointed that it doesn't continue around onto the front.
So a little bit better, wouldn't it?
You can open it and you can just put a little aside there. Might talk about album covers. Yeah, I mean, Steve Vai, this definitely sounds more like Steve Vai. He's always sort of described as one of the shredders of the 80s. Mm-hmm. That's not really Steve Vai at all, is it really? He's just the closest thing to sort of electric guitar maestro that you can get, really. And this album's got it all. It's just lots and lots of different types of guitars, incredibly well performed in a sort of, I think it is a sort of concept album in the sense that it was something to do with his dreams or something like that. It's like
he'd been planning it for a long time, from before Flexible, I think.
Yeah, and he'd sort of obviously been off with all these different bands, and he hadn't really had time for it, but this was his sort of stepping out of that shadow, really, to become sort of like the headline performer. It's really hard to say what it is about this album that sort of isn't quite at the top level. I mean, if you analyse it, it's pretty perfect, production-wise. A bit long.
Yeah.
It's 60 minutes, typical sort of album of that time. There's a lot to get through, but it is interesting. It's constantly interesting. It's sort of things melding into it, but you've got it changes, but you don't necessarily notice the change. And that's an incredibly difficult thing to get right. And he does it almost effortlessly, it seems.
Yeah.
But that's probably from the effort he's put in, you know, the period of time over he's taken to actually write it. But for some reason, I can't put my finger on it. It's not quite up there.
Yeah.
I can't quite get my grasp on what it is.
I agree. I think I know what it is anyway. I think, strangely, being the guitarist kind of person who defends Zengbai and all that stuff, instrumental guitar albums, there's good instrumental guitar albums. I enjoy instrumental guitar albums. There's some great ones. You know, Blow by Blow by Jeff Beck is one of my favourites. You know, like Joe Satriani ones and things like that. There's a limit to how much they can be interesting. A whole album of it, you know, one song of it, that's a different thing entirely. That's brilliant. But a whole album of Joe Satriani is great, but it's not Dark Side of the Moon. It's never going to be Six Eggs. You can't have a Six Egg. And however, Steve Vai, because he's such a great composer, remember he grew up as a composer as much as a guitarist, and obviously he did the thing with Zappa, and not just playing his band. He got the job because he was transcribing the nasty stuff, the Black Page and all that stuff, and that was what impressed Zappa so much. And you know, more recently he's done some orchestral stuff as well, which sounds very Zappa, unsurprisingly. So I think, in terms of instrumental guitar albums with no singing on, Steve Vai is your best bet. Interestingly, there's not that many of his albums that are instrumental. Most of his albums have got loads of instrumentals, but this is one of the few with no singing on it at all. So in that sense, it's probably seen as a prototype. It's much better than Surfing with the Alien, I think, which is, like I said, it's a good album, but it can get a bit boring. And Surfing with the Alien is an 80s thing, you remember. This is his 80s album, but compositionally there's just a lot more going on. And I think he's moved on, you know, that the Zapparism, which is really apparent on Flexible, it's all still there, but he's really good at making it is simpler, but making it kind of still that stuff, but much more accessible. A lot of that is down to because it's cool guitar, I think, rather than or bloody marimba or all that stuff that Zappa does, you know. Played on a guitar with this fantastic tone is a wonderful thing.
Yeah, you're probably right as to what it is. In a sense, if you listen to the whole album of Satriani, it sounds like Satriani all the way through. Whereas this, I don't know what the Steve Vai thing is. You don't get the sense that there's a Steve Vai thing. You know, am I gonna put a piece of guitar on completely blind and say that's Steve Vai? That is.
Oh, I could.
Simply by how well it's played, or
the tone of the guitar.
Oh, right,
Yeah,
okay. Well, I can't do that. But I wouldn't say, you know, this is in the style of Steve Vai, because Steve Vai does lots and lots of different styles.
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah.
You're right. Yeah. I still think it's very distinctive, though. Whether there's a commercial end to this particular album, though, I think there probably is. From his comments about later on, he's saying how great he actually enjoyed doing Alien Love Secrets, which isn't even a full album; it's an EP. That was, you know, when he really stamped his thing on the 7th Street. We'll talk about 7th Street. The thing he said about that was that it had no commercial interest at all. Although at the time it was probably the right album for the time, but he just made the album he wanted to make. So I suspect here there was a commercial thing. He needed to kickstart his career, although his career had been going for 12 years or whatever. You know, he'd been in David Lee Roth and Whitesnake. Now was the time. His name is out there. That Steve Vai, he's an amazing technician. He had to get this out there, and it worked. And it might be his biggest selling album, I don't know. But it's certainly a big hit at the time. It got into the top 20 or something in America, which for an instrumental guitar album is astonishing.
Yeah, that's amazing.
You think, whatever success Malmsteen had, probably in Japan really, that was with the boring 80s stuff actually, not with the good stuff. So yeah, the best is still to come, very much. This is his... He's starting a journey which wasn't apparent on Flexible. I think that's what it is. I certainly think that's the album that for most people that defines him. People have actually heard him rather than just judging him before even listening. You're not even listening. You know, he doesn't actually play fast. All speed and no feeling. He's not really a fast picker. He can, obviously. I mean, he had to do Alcatraz, didn't he? So he had to do all that stuff. But you think about it, the Vai thing, it's a lot of legato, it's a lot of whammy bar. It's like, he's said this, it's not about the notes precisely played, it's the tone of the sound of the notes coming out. You know, how do you control the notes? Like a sculpture, you sculpt your notes on the guitar, and he's really, really good at that.
Yeah.
You know, people say great guitarist, great tone about Jeff Beck. Same with Steve Vai. The fact that he's such an obsessive in a way Jeff Beck isn't. Jeff Beck is an interesting character in that it got to the point he was saying he's more interested in messing around with his cars than playing the guitar. And he plays the guitar and everyone's completely blown away by how fantastic it is. He's just going bang, bang. And I'm sure from Jeff Beck's perspective, there's not much, you know, it's just naturally coming through. Whereas Steve Vai, he has this, his obsession is with the practicing. So 10 to 15 hour a day practice. That's how he did it. You know.
Well, here's something interesting. Is he like that because he worked with Frank Zappa, or was Frank Zappa interested in him because he was like that?
Frank Zappa was interested in him because he was like that. Yeah, he was already like that. I think there's a later album which explores that. He had a bad trip or something which made him a bit crazy, I think, and it made him obsessive, which worked in his favour. I wish that had happened to me. Just really focus on something and not be lazy. And that's the thing, isn't it? It's these type of people who he's just not as lazy as the rest of us.
Well, he obviously loves playing the guitar, doesn't he? And he's quite happy to spend all day playing the guitar.
No, yeah. Well, we should talk about the music. How can we talk about the music?
There's some good music on here.
Yeah. Like, lots of great melodies, really, isn't it? There's quite a few ballads. The thing about ballads is they're better if they're played on the guitar. That's a big part of it. If they're sung by David Coverdale,
yeah,
and it's boring.
David Coverdale is on here, isn't he?
He says one line. He says, "Treading the fine line between pagan and Christian," or something. Did you know David Coverdale? He does that deep croaky voice. He has a sleep before he records his albums. That's so he can sound more.
Yeah, because sometimes I wake up in the morning and I'm like, whoa,
yeah.
And I think, wow.
Yeah, you can sing like David Coverdale.
I can do the blues now. The Riddle's quite a good song. Quite like that one.
I mean, also significantly, I mean, we watched that DVD, didn't we, of 2001 Live in London.
Yeah, with Horsey, was it?
Yeah, and there's Bad Horsey and stuff on there. Half of that album is on that live album from 11 years later.
That's strange, isn't it?
And that, you know, that says a lot that this is a popular one. And you know, I mean, I think Liberty and For the Love of God, he plays at every concert. I don't know if he still does, but it's certainly for 15 years. All the the two concerts I saw him with, he closed the show with the Attitude song, For the Love of God, Liberty. So they're a big thing. So like I said, it's this spiritual thing, and it was about his dreams.
See, I normally would find that completely tiresome.
Yeah, it sounds like a turn off. But you think about it, it shows how good he is at translating that into something that people can relate to, and it's not like there's something there that you're not getting. You get the emotion of it quite easily, I think, compared to Zappa or something. What's really interesting, there's loads of lyrics. These are the lyrics to the songs, and of course they're all instrumentals. Except for there's spoken word stuff. So like I said, there's David Coverdale saying his thing, and it's not all serious. You know, the fun is still in there. The same as flexible. You know, the audience is listening. Is the one where the teacher's saying, "Little Steve, don't be nervous." And they're just saying, "Be quiet, turn it down," and all that. That's so much fun. Not a fantastic piece actually. It's a pretty average piece. Obviously, put that on. It's great. But really interesting. He's got lyrics to instrumental songs.
I think that's probably part of the creative process. So you hear of some authors when they write a book, what they do, especially the ones who work pretty hard, is they write the story from the perspective of every character in the book.
Right, yeah.
But obviously that doesn't all go in there, so it sort of makes sure that the story makes sense, continuity and stuff like that. But it also means it's a fully fleshed out sort of experience. And I can see actually this would be quite useful for him to focus the music. Yeah. Sort of thing.
Yeah, here's a poem, but that's what the emotion is.
Yeah.
This is the music for that emotion, not didn't have to sing it.
Yeah. I'm glad that he didn't find a vocalist or sing those words on there.
Those words, yeah. Well, we'll talk about that next week. So yeah, that's the instrumental one. It's one of his few. There's not many instrumental ones. Yeah.
Should we egg this sucker?
Let's egg it. Again, it's very difficult. I think I'm going to give it 4 eggs. Although there's some great stuff on here. Not as much fun as Flexible. It's probably better than Flexible.
Yeah, I think.
But I prefer flexible. So it's very difficult, and I think it has limited scope. Even though for him it means a lot, and it sort of imprints what Steve Vai you think as a person. It's an instrumental guitar album, like I said, and it can only go so high.
Yeah, but it's probably the best instrumental guitar.
In what way? Yeah.
So and that's I'd give it 5 eggs.
What did I give flexible?
5.
Yeah, it's got to be at least on par with Flex.
There you go.
Able.
And so we journey forth next week to Fire Garden.
Yeah.
See you next week.